welcome back to the Rules of Engagement. Before we talk about how this amazing game basically plays out in the late game, I want to remind you guys, if you're interested at all in getting educated in like graphic design, audio engineering, video game production, basically anything that is involved in building a video game, or even in working with like a company like Major League Gaming and working in part of our shows and stuff, fullsail.edu can meet all of your educational needs. Give yourself the tools you need to basically get a career in this field. So go ahead, check it out. www.fullsail.edu/MLG. Let them know what your interests are, and they'll tell you about the different programs they have that may help you out with a career later down the road. So before we jump in this late game, let me remind you guys, any questions you have about anything, tweet them at me at axslav, because after this segment is going to be the Q&A. So the Twitter is at axslav. Go ahead, tweet me any questions. We'll answer them at the end of the show. And of course, this game is amazing. You want to check out this VOD or any other ones, youtube.com/official MLGSC2 to catch up on all of our VOD content. So now going into this game, as the late game approaches, there's a couple things that we're going to talk about. One is going to be different Terran late game approaches, different ways that Terran can basically try to play the late game. And then we're going to talk about the way a Zerg player has to react depending on how the Terran plays the late game. And then talk about, you know, Zerg late game units are pretty straightforward, and actually they come out more at a 20-minute mark. Breed Lords, Ultras, etc., even earlier. Zerg players can get them out as early as, 15 minutes often, depending on how the game plays. But TVZ, they often come out a little bit later. But anyways, the Terran super late game units, Ravens, Ghosts, and Battlecruisers, those often come out way later. So we'll talk about how they play into a game, because people don't see these units used as much as they do the Zerg high-tech units. So, jumping into the game, we're going to take it pretty much where we left off. And basically, Bomber, remember, he killed this hatchery. He lost a bunch of medevacs over here. Both players maxed out. Goswser with more bank in his max, because Bomber, of course, is spending all his money on these command centers. So, as a Terran player like Bomber, there's multiple ways to play out the late game. One way is basically to build a ton of barracks, crank out a ton of bio units, keep going your Marine tank medevac, and keep doing just drops everywhere, and then rally out hordes of Marines and push them from the front, drop them from the back, keep attacking in every single location, because yes, when a Zerg gets these, where's the Breed Lords? There's Breed Lords somewhere. When a Zerg gets the Breed Lords and they get the Infestors, all of a sudden, your Marine medevac army isn't so cost efficient. But if you can spread them out, attack everywhere, keep trading units, keep their economy low, they're not going to be able to build up that huge Doom Zerg death ball that's scary. Like right now, 5 Breed Lords and 4 Infestors, you can kind of beat that with a Marine tank army if you, micro it super, super well and you spread them out. So you can go for the low tech and basically overwhelm them with superior economy and mobility. Of course, Marines medevac's very mobile, and Terran always has the best economy in the late game, because people will stop at a certain worker count because you can't use up too much of your food and workers. So you're going to have a relatively even worker count in the late game. But of course, Terran player, if you look at structures, is going to have, he's got 6 orbital commands. You're going to at least have like 4 or 5. So you're always going to have a lot more economy as Terran player. So often you can just try to overwhelm your opponent with mineral-centric units like the Marine. Of course, the other way you can do is what Bomber's choosing to do here is you can turtle up, right? We can see here, mines, siege tanks, sensor tower. This command center is almost for sure going to be a planetary when that completes. Planetary over here, more tanks. Turtle up and go for air tech. The reason why I have to turtle up is because these air units, you got to build a lot of starports. We can see here he's built 5 different starports. That takes a lot of money and a lot of time. And then you have to, crank out units. Yeah, Ravens take a while to build energy. Battlecruisers take forever to build, etc. So you got to turtle up and basically survive until you get to that point. Now, as a Zerg player, let's jump over and look at what Goswser is up to. As a Zerg player, when you're basically going to late game, you have to identify what the Terran player is doing. If they're staying low tech and throwing tons of drops here, right? We saw Bomber do that earlier, but if we take a look at the structure tab, Bomber only has 10 barracks. I say only because at this stage in the game, 10's not a very large number. If your opponent has something like 16, 18 barracks, they can start throwing Marines everywhere so fast that it can be hard to keep up with just Speedlings, Infestors, and Corruptors, because your opponent can outproduce you because they have more economy. So if they go for that strategy, what you want to do is build a ton of stack defense, and keep your army back. Your army can control one part of the map, and you mass stack defense the other. And then once you're basically safe from all these Terran counterattacks and mobility plays, you can build up a super big army and go for the death blow. However, if your opponent, like Bomber, right, if he played as forward, is going for the air tech, right, we can see all these starports. And Goswser knows this because Bomber's not being aggressive. If they're going for the air tech, you don't have time to build a whole bunch of spine cores down here, spine cores over here, and wait for like 20 broodlords and then go and kill them. What you have to do is you have to try to attack soon because you do not want to let Terran build up a whole bunch of ravens. Where are these ravens at? You don't want to let them get it to like a whole bunch of ravens with a ton of energy. If they can get a lot of ravens with a lot of energy, all of a sudden you're basically dead because there's just not much you can do. If they get like, like 10 BCs and 30 ravens and then a bunch of missile turrets, you're done for. So that's the point. You can't let them get there. So what you got to do is try to put on the pressure before Terran can reach that ultimate army. Remember, it takes them a long time, so you've got time to do damage before these ravens can get a large count, get a lot of energy, before BCs can go into play, etc. So you really want to push to action going forward here. Now, that's exactly what Goswser is doing. We can see here the Seekers are avoided by most of the ground units, which is important. Tanks getting swarmed over. Goswser, what he's doing here, he's not going to like destroy Bomber with this push. But if he can keep the pressure on, Bomber's forced to use his barracks to rebuild these units, and then Goswser can then come again here with a whole ton of these corruptors. In fact, let's actually fast forward just a bit here. We can see 17 corruptors. He can rebuild an army very fast. That's Zerg's advantage. They can rebuild their army fast. In the long run, with less economy, they can't keep up, but in the short run, with the larva mechanic, you can rebuild your army fast and then try to kill the Terran player, maybe deny this base, maybe kill this base, before they can really get that mass Raven BC army going. Force them to keep spending your money on Marines and Marauders, etc. So that's what Goswser is going to try to do here going forward. Bomber, of course, is going to try to stay alive and then tech up. Now we're going to talk about what should Bomber be teching up to, right? Ravens are always a good idea late game. All right, we can see Bomber's got his fleet of Ravens. He's going to continue to build more with those starports as the gas allows. But then what else do you want to go for? Other units that you could potentially go for are, of course, battle cruisers, right? If you already have the starports building Ravens, he's building 3 more. You can easily get some battle cruisers in there as well. Of course, he's got double armories here cranking out those air upgrades. So battle cruisers are a great idea to add in after the Ravens because Yamato cannons can one-shot every unit but the Ultralisk. And, of course, battle cruisers aren't really afraid of Ultralisk because the Ultralisk don't shoot air. So battle cruisers are a great addition once you have some Ravens help deal with the corruptors. The other option is, of course, Ghosts. So we can see here Bomber, in fact, is actually choosing to go Ghosts. He's building a lot of nuclear weapons because he's Bomber. He likes to, shoot bombs around. And Ghosts can be a good idea, too, because you already have all these barracks. So it's easier to produce Ghosts. They produce fast, and they can be useful as well. Not quite as powerful in a Doom army, but you can. It looks a lot cooler. You can keep the action going, and a lot more big explosions, which is what Bomber likes. So as we go forward, now we're going to talk about how you can utilize your late game units. So one cool trick that Bomber does. In fact, if you guys are watching, I believe it was Game 2 in the series, he used the same trick to great effect. It was up on Reddit for basically ever because it was amazing. If you notice when you launch Seeker missiles, the unit that they're being launched at turns red. But that only looks red to, let's say you're Ghost user. If you launch Seeker missiles at, let's say, this Corruptor, he'll see his Corruptor turn red, and he'll run it away and either get out of range, or at least he'll move it so there's no splash damage. But if you launch Seeker missiles at your own unit, right, what's going to happen is all Ghost user sees is a unit. He may notice it's red, but normally, at least when this was played, people didn't expect this tactic, so they're not really looking for that. And even if they kill the unit, what happens is if the unit dies, all the Seekers hit that unit, hit where the unit died. So they still go off, they still do the splash damage, they'll all land where the unit died. And if you can get your unit underneath all these infestors, you'll lose the medevac, but you'll blow up all the infestors. So it's a really great combination. Unfortunately, if you look what Bomber did here, the way, a lot of people don't notice, so I'm going to basically say the way Seeker Missile works. You can cast Seeker Missile on a target up to 10 range away. And then over the next few seconds, if that target moves to range 13 or further, or past 13, excuse me. If it moves past range 13, then the Seekers basically turn into duds and don't go off. If the unit stays within that 13 range, then the Seeker missiles shoot at a very fast rate. I mean, they basically go movement speed like 20 or something, and they're going to hit that unit no matter what. So, actually, maybe you can blink dodge, but I don't know. Actually, you can't blink dodge. It'll blow up where the Stalker used to be. So right here, the mistake Bomber makes is if we look at where the Seeker missiles, the Ravens haven't moved, so the Seeker missiles were shot from right around here, right? That's where they were shot from. And what you can do is think of where you shoot them from as a siege tank. And if you're a Terran player, you get pretty experienced with the range of siege tanks, especially in TVT. You have to really understand ranges. And you can kind of draw a circle of range 13. So like range 13 is kind of like up around basically like here, right? Or it's a little further than that. So I'm actually, the screen's big, so it's throwing me off. It's more like around, basically this is about your range 13, or actually that's probably more like 11. But you get the point. In a smaller screen, it's easier to tell. You know your range 13. When you do this trick, you can't send that medevac outside that range until the Seeker missiles start shooting. So you want to keep it inside. You want to keep the medevac inside this area, right? Inside here, up until the Seeker missiles go off, and then you can run a little bit further, because once they're moving, you're pretty much set. So it's an awesome technique. I encourage you Terran players to practice it. It's a great way to utilize the Ravens. But unfortunately, in this case, what happens, you can see the Seeker missiles, they all go basically dud, because the medevac moved a little bit too far out. One thing you can tell is this Infestors shooting the fungals from here, and that's range 10, and they shot him from the max range in that case. So 13, the medevac was just barely outside that range 13 mark, and now he's kind of stuck with these guys' fungals. So Ravens are always really good late game, but you got it. They're really good if you can do it just perfectly. And then of course right here you can see if you lock onto a bunch of units at once while the Vikings are firing, all of a sudden Goswser has to split his units up multiple directions, and all this time, even if he can avoid a lot of splash damage, the Vikings are still getting a lot of free shots, and all of a sudden 3-4 Vikings killed a good number of units, and then he's got all the extra units back there he kind of forgot about. Now again, remember, right now Goswser has a superior force because of larva mechanic, who's able to outproduce Bomber. But what he wants to do is keep the action going forward, because if Bomber can rebuild the Ravens and get that count going back up again, he'll be in trouble. So he's going to look to corner this army with some fungal growth, utilize the Broodlords to their full effect, losing a few Corruptors here, but not too many, because Broodings are taking most of the shots. And what Bomber's looking to do is buy time to this Marine force, right? If he can distract Goswser for long enough, what he can do is he can rebuild his Viking count. We can see Vikings are 4 at a time, Ravens 3 at a time. And the awesome thing about the new Seeker Missile in the Heart of the Storm, a Raven pops out with enough energy to cast a Seeker Missile immediately, because they reduce its cost by just so much. So, I mean, that's what he's going to try to survive. Goswser is trying to push the action here with the Broodlords. And we can see here, Bomber's going to come in here and try to launch these Seeker Missiles. And the thing is, though, when you do Seeker Missiles, as a Terran player, you want to try to concentrate them on individual targets. If there's Broodlords, try to cast 3 on the same Broodlord, or 2 on one Broodlord, 1 on one next to it, because against a great player like Goswser, he's going to try to split them up a bit. And if you halfway kill a lot of these guys, a few transfuses later, they're going to be all back up to full life. So try to concentrate that firepower. Where the Seeker Missiles really shine, right? A Seeker Missile to Zone Refiner, which is kind of an interesting move there. What your Seeker Missiles really shine is as soon as you get a good Viking count, right? If you have a bunch of Vikings right here, your opponent, if they want to engage the Vikings with the Corruptors, those Corruptors have to pretty much all engage at once, right? If he only sends a few Corruptors at a time, what's going to happen is the Vikings will just tear them to pieces. And then, unfortunately, he runs these Corruptors, and the Seeker Missiles can do massive, massive damage as the Corruptors try to engage the Vikings in bulk. So, the thing with Seeker Missiles is, if one doesn't fail, keep doing it. They're short on energy. They're useful no matter what Zerg is going. Keep cranking those guys out. Now, at this point in the game, Bomber holds off, but Goswser did force Bomber to invest a lot of money back into the Bio Army. And he's been able to keep the action pace so that Bomber, he's still only at 7 Ravens, 10 Vikings. Not the ultimate doomed Terran late game army he wants. There's no BCs in there yet. But he's starting to increase that ghost count here, right? So he's got a couple of ghosts out here, and they're starting to build up. And this is where we get into a stage where you start having to worry about basically nukes. The way a nuke works in the late game is the nuclear weapon, of course, you build them in the Ghost Academies. Extremely powerful for harassing bases, right? You can kill a bunch of drones, and that's nice. But in a late game like this, let's say you kill all these drones. He can rebuild those. That's a 600 mineral cost to rebuild 12 drones. And a Terran, of course, spends 100 minerals, 100 gas, and they might lose the Ghost, which is the 200 minerals, 100 gas. It's not actually that amazing if your opponent has a bankroll, so attacking their economy doesn't hurt them that much. They just rebuild the drones, and they're back good. They're back in basically the good side. Where the nuclear weapons are really strong is for positional play against the armies. The late game is mostly about the army compositions and how the armies engage each other. So here more secret missiles going off. And you notice how he does it when the Zerg player has a hard time escaping because they're cornered in the alley. And killing a bunch of infestors, and without the infestors, the Bio army can keep cutting back forever and doing some great damage. So right here, the nuke is a great positional tool. Because right here, he killed a bunch of Ultralists, right? And now the Ultralists close the distance, and they have to make a decision. Do we keep closing distance with the Terran army? If we do, Terran might back away right before the nuke lands, and the Ultralists all get hit by the nuke. If we don't, we just lost 2 to 3 Ultralists trying to get in close to the Bio army for basically no good reason. So the nuclear weapon there, even if it doesn't hit anything, you get a bunch of free kills on the Ultralists, and you cancel that nuke. Very important to cancel that nuke when you go on the chase again. So nuclear weapons, not just about harassing their bases, but also about getting constant, basically free damage by, going to kill. It's kind of a funny move there. Going to kill a unit, and then when they close the distance, or basically forcing them to be afraid of closing the distance, launching a nuke on where the Zerg army would be if they want to engage. So again, going in here, right? What he's going to do is he's going to launch a nuclear weapon, and then the Zerg player has to either fight and risk getting hit by the nuke as it goes down, or they have to run away, and meanwhile, they don't get the planetary. They've lost some units. The Vikings killed a couple corruptors. The Marines are going to kite back against the Ultralists. A lot of damage is being done. Unfortunately, where this comes a problem is when the Zerg player knows the time of the nuke very well, and they back away at the perfect time. And right when they back away, this is when you cancel the nuke. You cancel a nuke, and you've killed a bunch of Ultralists. You've lost very little. I mean, the planetary you've got, you can just move one of these orbitals over. It's not a big deal, or you can rebuild it. Planetary doesn't cost nearly as much as 4 or 5 Ultralists, right? So when they back up, that easy cancel the nuke. Unfortunately, Bomber kind of forgot to do that, and loses a lot of guys there. So that wasn't good. But, so this is why you should go BCs late game, right? Nukes look cool. They're great for positional play. But all it takes, you've been playing... for context, this is game 3. The first 2 games are like 40 minutes each. So, after grinding out against Goswser for like well over an hour, one little mistake like that with nuclear weapon, and you can easily lose the game. So, do not mess around with nukes. Can be very powerful, but they can also kind of kill you too. So again, the same idea. He puts a nuke here. Idea is if he does a hit and run stuff with the Zerg might want to back away, and a nuke can land do serious damage. Also notice how he focused Overseers down first. At the very least, he forced all the Breed Lords there to cancel. And then meanwhile, all these Secret Missiles are going to knock out a lot of those Infestors and Queens. Nuke doesn't kill a lot, but it forced all the cancels, which is effectively a lot of lost resources. Remember, if you cancel a unit, you lose 25% of the resources spent on that morph. So nukes can be very, very, very effective, but as we saw back, I think it was on this alley right here, you got to make sure to cancel them if you're walking through that target death trap. And again, if there's a lull into action, that's when you can go ahead and start to use those nukes for other purposes too, right? And that's when they can really look awesome. You get in here, and you can launch the nukes at the actual base. And it's really effective when you combine them with an actual unit drop. And the reason why is twofold, right? If you just drop a Ghost, cloak it a nuke, a player like Goswser, who's insanely good, will see the medevac, and he'll see the nuke go down. He'll hear nuclear launch detected, and then he'll like, where did he launch a nuke? Oh, there's the medevac there a second ago. I should go and deal with this. But you drop a bunch of units out. In a long game like this, a lot of stuff he's macroing everywhere. Is he going to count the exact Marines and Marauders and say, wait a minute, you could have had 2 more units in those medevacs? No, even if he does count and see you're 2 units short that he doesn't see, he's going to assume you just didn't load him up fully. So it's great like that. He'll say he's under attack, so he won't hear the nuclear sound as easily. He still might notice it, but he might not. And the other great thing is he has to send units to defend that drop. Remember how I said killing some drones can be good, but if you're assuming that Bomber's got Goswser has a good bank here, he's going to eventually mine this out anyway. It's more just killing the drones and delaying the mining that really hurts, and it's not that huge, right? 20 drones is 1,000 minerals. It's big, but it's not going to be a game-winning move. But if you can lure their army in here, if he runs his Corruptor force to knock out these medevacs and you get all the Corruptors, I mean, if you get 10 Corruptors, that's 2,500 resources. That's a huge amount of damage done. So really, really great to combine it with a drop in the late game like this. You know, they're going to come in here. Maybe he'll figure it out. Maybe he won't. But the EV on it is very high. Of course, here what happens is one of the nukes doesn't go off because the ghost gets funkled and revealed, and then the Overseer sees it. And so he saw the nuke, and he's like, okay, there was a nuke. I stopped it. But really, there was double nukes. And then, of course, the second one lands. And imagine if it got these Infestors and these Corruptors. Right now, they just got hit to splash, so they just got, you know, 150 damage instead of the full nuke. And some of the Ultralists did, but Ultralists are tough. They can handle a nuke. In fact, they might actually get stronger from it. But no, they don't. So the Ultras can handle it, but if he was able to get this Corruptor force and Infestors, that's a ton of resources, not to mention all the drones. So utilize the nukes with something else, and then it's much, much, much more effective. Of course, Goswser now realizes there was a second ghost there, so he's going to go and try to find that with his Overseer and Ultras combination, but he's afraid of walking back into nukes, so he waits for it to land, and then goes in and cleans out that ghost. So going forward in this game, what we've seen is Goswser tried to push the action and prevent Bomber from building up the Duo army and switching between Brooders and Ultralists to keep his opponent off guard. We've seen Bomber utilize the Ravens and the Ghosts, unable to attack to those BCs because he's felt compelled to constantly produce his bio army. And that's exactly that type of situation can maintain a status quo, because some late tech units, like some Ravens, mixed with primarily low tech units from a Terran, versus a Zerg high tech army is kind of a roughly even situation. And a Zerg player wants to keep it that way and even ideally try to totally kill the Terran bases. So it's under pressure for the Zerg to attack. If the Terran can ever get enough time to build up the massive BC army, then the Zerg is also at a disadvantage, as long as the BCs are supported by Ravens. Of course, BCs run into trouble against Corruptors unless they have the PDD and the Secret Missile support. And then, of course, with Emotocan, they can pick off enough Corruptors that with that support, they can do the rest. This situation here, when you're using Ravens, ideally what you want to do is get them very close to your target. And the reason why you get close is because if you're very close to your target, once you launch the Seeker Missile, there's no way that target can get to range 13 and dodge it before they go off. Of course, the disadvantage of getting close is your opponent, if they notice it, he could run to Ultras and try to stay underneath the Ravens so they all die to their own Seeker Missiles. Of course, this time he tried to escape and the Ultras died. You're losing a lot of energy, but again, right on top of the units that kept in Seeker Missiles, if you can get out of range in time, there's no way those units can escape, and it's a whole lot of free damage. So ideally what you do as Terran late game, you just mass Ravens, use the energy, you back up, you wait for it to recharge. But in this case, because Goswser kept the action so aggressive, Bomber was forced to make this Spy Army, and he's like, well, I've got the Spy Army right now, and I blew up a lot of his key support units and Fasters and some of the Brood Lords. I should try to make use of it. So he's trying to push the action here with the Bio Army and launching a nuke here, positional nuke again, catching rallied units as they come in. Ultralist, if Ultras rally comes in, a nuke might land on them and severely weaken them. And even if the Infestors stay there too long, they'll die as well. But as it turns out, the nuke is still going to land, but it just weakens the hatchery, doesn't quite get damage done. And Bomber's able to get a little bit of advantage knocking the hatchery out. Now, this is the point where Bomber succeeded in doing something with his Bio Army, which often doesn't happen in the late game. And ideally, he probably shouldn't be rebuilding this, because they're not going to do. They're not very cost efficient as the game goes on. And looking at the resources, yes, he's got 2,000, 1,000, but how much more resources can you mine, right? He's mining off scraps. So I would kind of like to see him maybe go for the BCs or some more cost-efficient units here. As it is, he's going to try to get something more done with the Bio Army. Goswser is going to shut it down, rebuild really quick with Ultras, and the game's going to continue. So going forward here, this game goes on. Both players trading blows for like the next half hour. It's pretty intense, but it's kind of more of the same. You're going to see a lot of cool Raven usage. Sometimes you want to, with Ravens, you want to get close to your opponent, then launch the Secret Missiles. Sometimes launch them from far away, And then when your opponent backs away, that gives you the space to get in there and kill the hatchery, just like a positional nuke. Of course, as a Zerg player, you want to basically keep the action going to prevent the Terran from being able to transition away from the bio fully, because the bio units are where you can be cost efficient as a Zerg player. So you have Fungals and Ultras, very efficient. Brood Lords, they're basically, broodings are free units against bio. That's where you want to force the trades. If you get into fighting Vikings and Ravens and BCs, maybe you land a couple clutch Fungals, but, with Seeker Missiles, it's very hard to chain Fungals, and they can back up and repair. Just because if you stay long with the chain to Fungals, you'll die to Seeker Missiles. Not to mention Yamato Cannons will pick off Infestors. And in Heart of the Storm, Yamato Cannon is a much cheaper spell. It's much, much, much stronger. So, a lot of cool action going there in the late game. Primarily what you guys should be thinking about is always get Ravens as a Terran player. There's no reason never to get Ravens in the late game. If you want to add Ghosts and do some nukes, sometimes we saw they can be amazing. Sometimes they can backfire. It's a little bit risky. If you don't want to go nukes, go for the BCs. They're much easier to use. Yamato Cannon can't... Well, actually, unless you specifically click your own units, it can't backfire. So always get the Ravens and then go for the BCs, or maybe Ghosts if you want to have fun. Zerg player, super late game, you got to keep that action going to prevent them from building up too much of a Raven count. The rest of this game, check it out. youtube.com/official MLGSC2. And also don't forget, tweet me questions at axslav, because we're going to take a short break and be right back with the Q&A.